Hi folks, welcome to the Prepared Homestead. This is Travis. Thank you all for stopping by to watch. Looks like the Russian Navy is kind of making some moves just the last few days. One of their most advanced naval submarines set sail. It actually carries a weapon that is the only weapon like it in the world. It is a unmanned sub torpedo. It's a torpedo, but it's kind of like a sub. It's nuclear powered, so it's capable of staying underwater pretty much indefinitely, and it can pack up to 100 megaton warhead, which is just astronomical. The estimates are that if something like this was detonated, it could cause massive tsunami tidal waves against a coastal city. Anyway, so that set sail a few days back, and they're out testing that. Now, of course, they're not going to do a live fire test, meaning they're not going to detonate nukes. At least that's what they say. But they are testing the systems, and then they will have a recovery vehicle. So they're getting out there and they're testing stuff. But also this morning, Taiwan reported something that I thought was a little on the strange side, that 2 Russian warships are off the coast of Taiwan. That's a long way from Russia, and up until, well, this point, it didn't seem like that the whole conflict between China and Taiwan had anything to do with Russia, but it does, because remember, China and Russia have made some pretty strange bedfellows in some ways. In other ways, it was the obvious thing that was going to happen. But definitely there's movement there in the Navy when it comes to Russia. Now, back to the sub thing, that's kind of serious. They're saying that this thing is virtually undetectable. And I don't know, because I'm sure a lot of this stuff being classified isn't even going to be told by our government. But if that is true, if there was ever a more heated conflict between us and Russia, this thing could potentially take out a coastal city. It could do a lot of damage. And remember, folks, that the vast majority of the population of the United States is on the coast. The huge mass of population lives on the coast, and that's the same way anywhere in the world. There's a lot of things happening, and I know that some of you, maybe even a lot of you, are worried about the fact that you're not as prepared as you want to be. You're worried about the fact that you're living in a place that you don't want to be to ride out the apocalypse. You would much rather be living on some little homestead property, or having a community around you. Maybe you're still stuck in the city. Maybe you're living in an apartment somewhere. Whatever it is, it doesn't even have to be a big city. You just know in your heart that this is not the place for me, and I really need to get out, or I really need to be more prepared. And I've heard feedback from some of you that it bothers you, and you're doing everything you can to fix that, but it's a slow process, or it seems like it's just never going to happen. I'm here to tell you that not to give up hope, number one. Just the fact that you're mentally aware of what's going on, that alone puts you at a much greater advantage than anyone else, than the vast majority of Americans around the country. If you're aware of what's going on, most likely you've taken some measures, maybe small, but still some measures to become a little bit more prepared. Maybe you've tried to learn new skills. Maybe you've purchased books. Maybe you have a small food supply and water. Maybe you've purchased a firearm. And you've set yourself a goal that, even though you may have a very small budget to work with, that you're trying to work towards being a little bit more prepared all the time. That right there also puts you head and shoulders above the vast majority of the American population. Now, that alone does not mean that you're good. You're going to survive what happens. You'll be all right. It just means that you have an advantage over them. Remember, and I know I always get a lot of kickback from this. It ruffles the feathers of a lot of folks. But cities are going to be the most unsafe place to be. They're already more unsafe. I mean, crime where I live, at least crime against other people, is virtually unheard of. Most of the crimes that exist out in these very rural parts of the country are crimes between, two people that already have issues. Maybe a husband wife in a domestic situation. Maybe someone that's doing drugs, maybe a bunch of people at a party drinking. They get into it. That's the vast majority of the crimes that happen out here. It doesn't mean that others don't. It's just that's the bulk of it. So for folks like myself, it's actually very safe to live out here compared to the city. So already the cities, they're already falling apart. We already know that. Violent crimes are skyrocketing everywhere. Everything from assaults to robberies, rapes, all that kind of stuff, skyrocketing in virtually all your cities around the country. So they're already a problem, and we know that the higher concentration of people you get together, the worse things are going to be. And so when things start really falling apart, whether it's World War III or an EMP attack, or just the grid goes down for whatever various reasons it could go down, we know that those cities are just going to be a hotbed for violence, for people behaving badly, for people just losing all hope and resorting to very violent behavior, almost animalistic behavior, just to try to survive. It's going to happen, and we know that because history has shown us that that's what happens in city areas where people are concentrated together, and they aren't prepared for anything. And we live in a society that's less prepared than probably any society ever existed beforehand. No one knows how to do anything to take care of themselves. The average person in America just can't figure out some of the most basic things. And so yes, it's going to get bad in the cities. If you're stuck in a city, the best thing I can tell you to do is to have as much supplies as you can and be prepared to lock yourself in and have some kind of system that you set up that you can do that with some level of security. It's not going to solve all the problems. It's not going to make you impenetrable to the outside. You're not going to be able to actually build a fortress against what's going on outside your doors, but you can stop some of it. Other than that, your best bet is to just get out of there. It's better to get out now, because if you get out now and you get out into the countryside, even if it's small, I know a lot of people say, well, I don't have that kind of money to buy a farm. You don't have to buy a farm. Around here, I see places all the time. There's a place not that far from me, and I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you where it's at, because certainly not on here or through emailing some random person, because it's too close to me to just tell random people. But there's a little small house. It's nothing fancy at all, but it's nice, and it's very much tucked away on like 3 or 4 acres, and it's a very, very reasonable price. And that's not the only one. I'm just using that as an example. There's places like that. And do you have to sacrifice to do that? Yeah. We sacrifice things. We sacrifice the fact that, we can't have a pizza delivered anytime we want. We don't eat pizza. We don't eat gluten. We're very much, predominantly meat eaters around here, so we wouldn't eat it anyways. But if I ever wanted to order a pizza, have it delivered, I can't. If we needed anything from a store after about 8:30, forget it, because they're all closed and they're all too far away to get to. Law enforcement, if something happens and I need to call the police or the sheriff's department or an ambulance, it could be 45 minutes to an hour before they get here. Cell service, internet service isn't always that great. There are some disadvantages to living like this. There's a disadvantage to living this as simple as we do. We don't have many of the modern conveniences that a typical normal house has. And we've done that to downsize our expenses to the point that we can easily afford to live this lifestyle. If we came out here and we had a very nice, beautiful home and land and everything, I would probably have to just work ourselves to death, both my wife and I, may not even be able to afford it or to enjoy it and to actually get out there and plant gardens and take care of animals, because we would just constantly be working all the time. That's why we have one vehicle and it's 20 some years old. We've downsized ourselves to the point that we can make it easily affordable to live this lifestyle. My wife doesn't have to work. She can take care of the children. She homeschools them, and she cooks, and she cans, and she does all kinds of things like that. And so part of making this lifestyle shift so that you can become more self-sufficient and in the end ultimately really prepared for things that go on, it does include sacrifice. It does include kind of starting all over. And I see people do it all the time. I just met someone just a few days ago in my area that's doing this. They are, I mean, they're not old. I don't know their age, but I would say they could they're in the window of potentially being my parents' age. Maybe not quite that old, but definitely in that area. And they pretty much liquidated everything they had, bought some raw land, and they're literally living in a tent on that raw land so that they can build them a place to live. And here they are at the latter end of their lifespan, and they're doing it all over again. And I can tell you from talking to them, they're doing it not with the ability that they're in just perfect health. In fact, they don't have perfect health. We have other friends that are definitely in my parents' age group, and they've done the same thing. They've been doing it now for about 2 years, and it's been a struggle at times, and the community's helped them with things because that's what we do as a community, but they're being successful at it. So it is possible. But here's the thing. This is where it all the hinges on. It's how dedicated and how serious you are to getting out of these places that you all know. You can sit here and you can convince yourself, and you can argue, you can leave all the comments in the world about how the cities aren't that bad. I mean, I have all these other things, and well, the one that I live in isn't that bad. The neighborhood that I live isn't that bad. Oh, well, that's because the purge hasn't happened. And you just wait till the purge happens and we'll see how bad these cities are. And I may be speaking a little bit sarcastically and stuff based on that movie. I actually never saw the movie, but I know what it's about. But it'll get like that. Maybe not as bad, could be worse, but it'll happen eventually. And then you won't be able to say that, well, I live in a better neighborhood. It's the same thing that when I talk about homeschooling, of how important it is to homeschool your child. And I get these people, well, we don't homeschool because the school that my child goes to is actually a pretty good one. Really, I guarantee you they're still teaching pride stuff and gender identity stuff and all kinds of stuff, because they all do. They all have to. It all comes down from the teachers' unions and the Department of Education. I know that this ruffles some people's feathers. It gets them upset. They don't like being told something that they just don't want to know. There's just certain things in our lives at times we want to not know about them. We would rather just stick our head in the sand and ignore it. This is not something that you can stick your head in the sand. You may be stuck in the city. You may not be able to get out, and you may have to figure out a way to survive the impending apocalypse in the city. But you can't be telling yourself and convincing yourself that it's okay to live in the city. It's not going to be. There's never been a time in history where societies go through any kind of rapid, massive change that larger city metropolitan areas are safe. They're just not. They're not now, and they won't ever be. And for those of you that can, and it's not just those of you that can, because really all of you could if you really wanted to. There may be a few exceptions. It's those of you that will. You should be trying to find places. And it doesn't have to be here where I live. There are places all over the country. In fact, look at a map and look at population maps, and you'll see that the vast majority of the landmass of this country is not in cities. So there are lots and lots and lots of places. It's cheaper to live generally out in the city. You have to sacrifice, you do with less, but you can make a go at it if you try it and if you put your head to it. And even if you're doing with just a little bit and you don't have a lot of knowledge, and I've seen so many people around here that's moved here, they watch this channel and they move here, and they don't have a lot of knowledge, but they're willing to learn, they're willing to sacrifice, and they have the motivation and the determination and that mental fortitude to make it, and then they do. And I mean, would it be great if they knew how to do it off, you know, starting off? That'd be great. But even if they don't, they figure it out. If your safety and your survival and your family's safety and survival is worth it, you'll figure it out. So don't get downtrodden. Don't get all depressed because we see all of these bad things happening every day and we hear about it. Those things have been foretold for a long time. They have to happen. They will happen. And there's not much any of you can do to stop most any of those things that are happening. All we can do now is just get ready. Get yourself stocked up, prayed up, and prepped up. And if at all possible, get out of those cities because they're just not going to be a place to survive in. Folks, it's time to get your houses in order, to prepare yourselves mentally, physically, and spiritually. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.